Chapter 1. The Challenge. The quiet hum of Marcus Hayes' ship, the Lone Voyager, was barely audible over the thoughts racing in his mind as he neared the Kthari homeworld, Verdunus. In all his years as a soldier, diplomat, and explorer, he had never felt such unease about a mission. The Kthari were a proud warrior race, their women towering above most humanoid species, standing an average of 8 feet tall with rippling muscle, deep blue skin, and a cultural heritage that placed them far beyond mere physical prowess. They were spiritual, mystical, even connected to their planet in ways Marcus could scarcely imagine. The human galaxy had first encountered the Kthari nearly 50 years ago, during an ill-fated expedition that led to misunderstandings, skirmishes, and eventually a fragile truce. Relations between the two species had been tense ever since, with only a handful of humans daring to step foot on Verdunus. Marcus had been there once before, during the Galactic Peace Summit, where he had caught a brief glimpse of Empress Valexa. He remembered that moment clearly. The Empress towering over the gathering of diplomats, her regal figure wrapped in shimmering silver armor, her golden eyes piercing through every soul in the room. There was an undeniable aura of authority about her, an authority that Marcus, even from a distance, could feel radiating from her every move. She had spoken only briefly during the summit, issuing a challenge to the entire galaxy. It was said that no Kthari woman would take a mate who hadn't proved his worth, and for an outsider, the challenge was even more daunting. No human had ever succeeded in winning the heart or the respect of a Kthari woman, much less their empress. But the prize was far greater than a union. Whoever succeeded would gain not only the empress's hand, but also the favor of the entire Kthari race, a powerful alliance that could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. Marcus's mission was clear. As an ambassador of the Galactic Union, he had been chosen to represent humanity in what was essentially a diplomatic and cultural trial. Many had tried before him and failed, leaving with nothing but broken pride. Now it was his turn to face the challenge. As the Lone Voyager descended through Verdunus's thick atmosphere, Marcus could see the vast plains of the planet stretching out beneath him, an endless expanse of emerald green under a sky that blazed with twin suns. Towering mountain ranges dotted the horizon, their peaks covered in shimmering mist. This was a world of primal beauty, raw and untouched by the technological overreach that defined much of human space. The landing was smooth, and as Marcus stepped out of his ship, he was greeted by an eerie silence. The air was heavy with a sense of anticipation. The Kthari were known for their ceremonies, and this was no different. As he walked toward the central city of Kthariar, the capital of the Kthari Empire, the ground seemed to pulse beneath his feet, almost as if the planet itself was watching him, judging him. The city itself was a marvel of organic architecture. Towering spires made of a strange, crystalline substance spiraled toward the sky, while lush greenery wove through every building, giving the impression that the city was as much a part of the planet as the mountains and plains. The streets were wide and lined with Kthari warriors, their eyes watching him closely as he passed. Marcus could feel the weight of their gaze, the unspoken challenge in their stares. He was an outsider, and he would have to prove himself worthy of being here. Finally, he arrived at the Grand Hall, where Empress Valexa awaited him. The hall itself was a massive structure, its ceiling so high that it seemed to disappear into the mist above. At the far end of the hall, seated on a throne carved from the bones of ancient beasts, was Valexa herself. She was even more imposing up close, her golden eyes glowing with an inner light, her muscular form wrapped in a shimmering black robe that accentuated every curve of her body. "Captain Marcus Hayes," she said, her voice a deep, resonant tone that echoed through the hall. "You have come to accept my challenge. Do you believe yourself worthy of standing before me, a mere human?" Marcus straightened his posture, refusing to be intimidated by her size or presence. "I believe that worth is not determined by size or strength alone, Empress," he said, his voice steady. "I've faced impossible odds before. I've been broken and rebuilt by the galaxy's harshest trials. If there's a test, I'm ready to face it." Valexa's lips curved into a slight smile, though her eyes remained hard as stone. "Bold words," she said, "but words alone will not suffice here. You will face 3 trials, human. The first will test your mind, the second your body, and the third, your soul. If you fail any one of them, You will leave this planet and never return. Do you accept?" There was no hesitation in Marcus's voice as he answered, "I accept." With a wave of her hand, the Empress signaled for the hall to clear. The Cathari warriors who had lined the walls silently filed out, leaving Marcus alone with Valexa. The air between them crackled with tension as the Empress rose from her throne and approached him. Even standing at his full height, Marcus only reached her chest. She towered over him, her golden eyes boring into his with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. "The first trial will test your mind," Valexa said, her voice low and dangerous. "You will face the Cathari spirit link, a connection to the ancient wisdom of our people. It is a connection that can drive the unworthy mad. If your mind is not strong enough, you will fall. Are you prepared?" Marcus nodded, though he had no idea what to expect. The Cathari were known for their spiritual practices, but the spirit link was something that few outsiders had ever experienced. He had heard rumors of it, whispers of a ritual that connected one's consciousness to the very essence of the planet itself. Some said it was like standing before the universe and seeing all of time and space unfold before your eyes. Others said it was like staring into the abyss of your own soul. Valexa placed a hand on his chest, her touch surprisingly gentle. "Then let us begin." Chapter 2. The Mind's Trial. Marcus felt a strange warmth spreading from the spot where Valexa's hand rested against his chest. It was an odd sensation, as though his very soul was being drawn out of his body, pulled towards some unseen force. The room around him began to blur, the walls of the grand hall fading away until there was nothing but a vast, endless void. He was no longer in Verdunus. At least, not in the physical sense. This was something else, something deeper, beyond the constraints of time and space. He could feel it in the air, in the very essence of the place he now inhabited. It was as if the planet's consciousness had wrapped around him, merging with his own mind. For a moment, there was nothing, just an overwhelming silence. Then, images began to flood his mind. Flashes of ancient battles, wars fought millennia ago between the Cathari and their enemies. He saw warriors standing tall, their bodies clad in shining armor, wielding weapons made of energy and light. He saw Valexa herself, younger but no less fierce, standing at the forefront of a massive army, her sword raised high as she led her people into battle. But the images didn't stop there. They shifted, showing him glimpses of the Cathari's spiritual practices, their rituals and ceremonies. He saw them communing with the planet, drawing power from its core, connecting their very essence to the life force of Verdunus. It was a connection that ran deeper than anything Marcus had ever known, a bond that transcended physical form, reaching into the very fabric of the universe. As the images continued to flood his mind, Marcus felt a pressure building within him. It was as if the weight of all this knowledge, all this history, was pressing down on him, threatening to overwhelm him. His heart raced, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps as he struggled to maintain his grip on reality. He could feel his mind straining under the pressure, the sheer intensity of the spirit link threatening to tear him apart. But he couldn't give up. Not now. Not when he had come this far. Focusing his thoughts, Marcus drew upon the training he had received during his time in the Galactic Special Forces. He had been trained to withstand mental assaults, to push his mind beyond its limits. He had faced down enemies who could manipulate the mind, who could twist reality itself. This was no different. He just had to stay focused, to keep his mind clear. Slowly, the pressure began to ease. The images became clearer, more focused, no longer a chaotic barrage of information, but a steady stream of knowledge. He could see now what the Cathari valued most: honor, strength, and above all, their connection to the planet. It was a bond that was more than just spiritual, it was symbiotic. The Cathari drew their strength from Verdunus, and in return, the planet fed off their energy, creating a cycle of life and power. As Marcus absorbed this understanding, he realized that the Cathari didn't just choose their mates based on physical ability or strength. They sought a deeper connection, one that transcended the physical and touched the very soul. To mate with a Cathari, especially their Empress, was to be chosen not just as a partner, but as someone who could bond with the essence of the planet itself. With that realization, Marcus's mind calmed. The images slowed, becoming clearer, more purposeful. He could see the Cathari's history laid out before him, their triumphs, their struggles, their deep connection to Verdunus. It wasn't overwhelming anymore. It was beautiful, a tapestry of life and tradition woven into the very fabric of the universe. When Marcus opened his eyes, he was back in the grand hall, standing before Empress Valexa. Her hand was still on his chest, but there was a softness in her gaze that hadn't been there before. She looked at him not with judgment, but with something approaching approval. "You passed the first trial," she said quietly, her voice carrying a note of respect. "Your mind is strong, stronger than most, but the second trial awaits, and it will not be as kind." Marcus nodded, his heart still racing from the experience. He had survived the spirit link, but he knew that the true challenge lay ahead. The Cathari were warriors, and their second trial would test his physical limits. But for the first time since he had arrived on Verdunus, he felt a glimmer of hope. He had passed the first trial. He had connected, however briefly, with the essence of the Cathari people. And in Valexa's eyes, he saw the faintest hint of something more, something deeper. "I'm ready for whatever comes next," Marcus said, his voice steady. Valexa gave him a slow nod, her golden eyes still watching him intently. "We shall see." She turned and gestured for him to follow her, leading him out of the grand hall and into the open air of Verdunus. The sky was a brilliant shade of orange, the twin suns low on the horizon. The air was thick with the scent of the planet, earthy and vibrant, almost alive. As they walked, Marcus couldn't help but notice the way the Cathari warriors stood taller, their eyes following him with a newfound respect. They had seen him survive the spirit link, a feat that only a handful of outsiders had ever accomplished. But Marcus knew that his journey was far from over. The second trial awaited, and it would push him to his limits. Valexa led him to a vast arena, its walls made of the same crystalline substance as the city's spires. Inside, the ground was covered in thick, green grass, and at the center stood a massive stone pillar. "This is where the second trial will take place," Valexa said, her voice low and serious. "It is a test of strength, endurance, and willpower. You will face one of our finest warriors in combat. The rules are simple: survive. You do not need to win, only to prove that you can endure." Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. Combat with a Cathari warrior was no small feat. Their strength was legendary, their endurance unmatched. But Marcus had faced impossible odds before, and he had no intention of backing down now. "I'm ready," he said, stepping into the arena. Valexa watched him for a moment, her gaze lingering on him before she turned and signaled to the other side of the arena. From the shadows emerged a towering figure, one of the Cathari's greatest warriors. She was even taller than Valexa, her muscles rippling beneath her blue skin, her eyes burning with the intensity of a predator about to strike. Marcus took a deep breath and squared his shoulders. This was it, the second trial. All he had to do was survive. But as the Cathari warrior charged toward him, her fists raised and her eyes locked on him, he knew that survival would be no easy task. Chapter 3. The Trial of Endurance. The moment the Cathari warrior charged toward Marcus, everything seemed to slow down. He could see the ripple of her muscles as she moved, the ground trembling beneath her massive feet. The Cathari were known for their raw power, their bodies designed for battle, and this warrior was no exception. Her eyes burned with a fierce determination, and her fists were clenched tightly, ready to strike. Marcus braced himself, shifting into a defensive stance. He had fought many battles in his life, but never against an opponent like this. The Cathari warrior closed the distance between them in a heartbeat, her massive fist swinging toward him with the force of a battering ram. Instinct kicked in, and Marcus dodged, rolling to the side just as her fist slammed into the ground where he had been standing. The impact sent a shockwave through the arena, the ground cracking beneath her blow. Marcus scrambled to his feet, his heart racing. He couldn't match her strength, he knew that much. But he didn't need to defeat her. He only needed to endure. The warrior turned to face him, a snarl curling on her lips. She was relentless, coming at him again with a speed that belied her massive size. Marcus ducked under her next swing, feeling the wind of her fist as it narrowly missed his head. He knew he couldn't afford to make a mistake. One wrong move, and this trial would be over, along with any hope of forming an alliance with the Cathari. As he dodged and weaved, Marcus's mind raced. He needed to think of a way to outlast her, to endure her onslaught without exhausting himself. His years of training in the Galactic Special Forces had taught him that sometimes the best way to win a battle wasn't through brute strength, but through strategy and patience. He let the warrior come at him again, her fists pounding the air as she swung wildly. Marcus dodged her strikes, staying just out of reach, forcing her to exert more energy with each missed blow. He could see the frustration building in her eyes, the way her breathing became more labored with each attack. For a moment, he considered going on the offensive, but he quickly dismissed the idea. He wasn't here to win by force. The trial was about endurance, about proving that he could survive against the odds. If he could outlast her, if he could show that he had the strength to endure even the fiercest of Cathari warriors, he would pass the trial. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as Marcus continued to evade her attacks. Sweat poured down his face, his muscles aching from the constant movement. But the warrior was slowing down too. Her strikes became less precise, her movements more sluggish. Marcus could see it in her eyes. She was tiring. And then, just as she raised her fist for another strike, Marcus saw his opening. He ducked low, rolling beneath her arm and planting his foot firmly against the ground. With all the strength he could muster, he pushed off, slamming his shoulder into her side. It wasn't enough to knock her down, but it was enough to throw her off balance. The warrior stumbled, her footing unsteady for the first time. Marcus backed away, giving her space, watching as she struggled to regain her composure. Her breathing was ragged now, her eyes blazing with both frustration and respect. She knew he wasn't trying to defeat her, but she also knew that he had outlasted her. With a growl, the warrior lowered her fists and stepped back, signaling the end of the trial. Marcus collapsed to one knee, gasping for breath. His body was battered and bruised, but he had done it. He had survived. The arena was silent for a moment, the weight of the trial settling over everyone present. And then, from the stands, came a slow, steady clap. It was Valexa, watching from above. Her golden eyes gleamed with approval as she descended into the arena, her presence commanding the attention of everyone around her. "You have passed the second trial, Marcus Hayes," she said, her voice filled with respect. "You have shown strength, endurance, and the ability to outthink your opponent. Few have made it this far." Marcus struggled to his feet, his body screaming in protest, but he stood tall before the Empress. "I told you, Empress. I didn't come here to fail." Valexa's lips curved into a small smile. "Indeed, but the final trial still awaits. The trial of the soul. It is the most difficult of all, for it requires not only strength of body and mind, but strength of spirit. You will face your deepest fears, your darkest memories, and only by embracing them will you succeed." Marcus nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. He had faced many challenges in his life, but none that had tested his spirit in such a way. Still, he had come this far, and there was no turning back now. "I'm ready," he said, though he wasn't sure if that was entirely true. Valexa's eyes softened, and for the first time, Marcus saw a glimmer of something more, something deeper. "You have proven yourself to me, Marcus, but this final trial is not one that I can guide you through. It is a journey you must take alone." With that, Valexa gestured toward a path that led out of the arena and into the depths of the planet. Marcus turned to follow, his heart heavy with anticipation. The trial of the soul awaited, and with it, the final test of his worth. As he walked, Marcus felt a strange calm settle over him. He had come to Verdunus seeking an alliance, but he had found something far more profound. The Cathari were not just warriors, they were a people deeply connected to their world, to their history, and to their very souls. And in facing these trials, Marcus was beginning to understand the true meaning of strength. But as he stepped into the darkness of the path ahead, he knew that the greatest challenge was still to come. Chapter 4. The Trial of the Soul. The path led Marcus deep beneath the surface of Verdunus, into a cavernous chamber lit by an eerie blue glow. The walls were covered in strange, luminescent symbols, pulsing with energy as if they were alive. The air was thick with an ancient power, a presence that made Marcus's skin tingle. At the center of the chamber was a large pool of water, its surface perfectly still, reflecting the glowing symbols on the walls. Valexa had told him that this trial would test his soul, his very essence. He had no idea what to expect, but he had learned enough about the Cathari to know that this would be no ordinary test. Taking a deep breath, Marcus stepped toward the pool, his reflection staring back at him from the still water. As he knelt beside it, he could feel the weight of the planet's gaze upon him, as if Verdunus itself was watching, waiting to see what he would do. With a steadying breath, Marcus reached out and touched the surface of the water. The moment his fingers made contact, the world around him vanished. He was no longer in the cavern. Instead, he stood in a vast, endless void, surrounded by nothingness. There was no sound, no light, just an oppressive silence that pressed down on him from all sides. And then, out of the darkness, came a voice. Marcus Hayes. It was his own voice, echoing through the void. Suddenly, images began to form around him, memories from his past. He saw himself as a young soldier, fresh out of the academy, full of hope and ambition. He saw the battles he had fought, the comrades he had lost. He saw the faces of those he had failed to save, their eyes filled with accusation. "You've always been running, haven't you?" the voice said. "Running from your failures. Running from the pain." Marcus's chest tightened as the memories continued to flood his mind. He had spent his entire life trying to be strong, trying to prove that he was capable. But deep down, he had always feared that he wasn't enough, that no matter how hard he tried, he would always fall short. The darkness closed in around him, the weight of his fears threatening to crush him. But as the pressure built, Marcus realized something. This trial wasn't about winning or losing. It wasn't about proving his strength to anyone else. It was about accepting himself, his failures, his weaknesses, his fears. Taking a deep breath, Marcus closed his eyes and let the memories wash over him. He didn't fight them. He embraced them. And in that moment, the darkness began to lift. The void faded away, replaced by the soft glow of the cavern. Marcus was back in the chamber, kneeling beside the pool. The water was still again, reflecting his image. But this time, he saw something different in his reflection. He saw not just a man who had survived countless battles, but a man who had faced his deepest fears and come out stronger. As he stood, Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had passed the final trial, and as he turned to leave the chamber, he knew that he had found something far more important than an alliance. He had found peace. When Marcus returned to the surface, Valexa was waiting for him. Her golden eyes gleamed with pride as she looked at him, and for the first time, there was no distance between them, only understanding. "You have passed the trials, Marcus," she said softly. "You have proven yourself worthy, not just to me, but to the planet itself." Marcus stood before Valexa, the weight of the trials behind him, yet a strange lightness filled his chest. The connection he felt with the planet, with the Cathari people, and with the Empress herself was undeniable. He had come to Verdunus as a representative of the Galactic Union, but he realized now that he had gained far more than he expected. He had earned the respect of a proud people and uncovered parts of himself that had long been buried. Valexa stepped closer, her towering form casting a shadow over him. But her gaze was soft now, not as an empress scrutinizing a subject, but as an equal recognizing another. "You have passed the trials, Marcus Hayes," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The Cathari accept you as one of us." A breath of relief escaped him, but before he could speak, Valexa placed a hand on his shoulder, her grip firm yet gentle. "But there is more. The final step is not one you can pass alone." He looked up into her golden eyes, feeling the intensity of her words. "What do you mean?" Valexa's eyes flickered with something that Marcus hadn't seen before: vulnerability. The bond of a Cathari mate is more than a union of bodies or minds. It is a joining of souls, a connection that runs through the deepest parts of our being. "I have seen your strength, your endurance, and your spirit, but now you must see mine." Marcus's heart raced. The weight of her words was clear. He wasn't just being invited to stand beside her as an equal, but to share something far more intimate, a connection that went beyond mere physicality. His breath caught in his throat as she stepped closer, her massive form towering above him, yet her presence felt comforting rather than intimidating. Without another word, Valexa extended her hand toward him, her palm open in invitation. "Do you trust me?" The question hung in the air, and for a brief moment, Marcus hesitated. Trust wasn't something that came easily to him. In his line of work, trust could be a liability, a weakness. But looking into Valexa's eyes, He saw no trace of deception or malice, only sincerity and a willingness to share her soul with him. With a steady breath, Marcus placed his hand in hers. The moment their skin touched, a surge of energy coursed through him. It was unlike anything he had ever felt before, an electric pulse that shot from his fingertips and spread throughout his body. His vision blurred, and for a brief moment, he felt as though he were floating, suspended between two worlds. He saw flashes of Alexa's life, her childhood as a warrior in training, her rise to empress, the burdens she carried as the leader of her people. He felt the weight of her loneliness, the pressure to be strong for her people while sacrificing her own desires. He could feel her soul, raw and unguarded, laid bare before him. At the same time, Alexa saw into Marcus's heart. She felt the pain of his losses, the deep scars left behind by battles fought and comrades fallen. She saw the heavy burden of responsibility he carried, the weight of every decision he had ever made. Yet through it all, she saw his resilience, his unyielding will to survive and protect those he cared about. It was a connection unlike any other, deeper than any bond Marcus had ever experienced. There were no walls between them, no barriers. In that moment, they were not empress and ambassador, but two souls intertwined, sharing their deepest fears, hopes, and desires. When the energy finally subsided, Marcus found himself back in the grand hall, standing face to face with Alexa. Her expression had softened, her golden eyes filled with a warmth he had never seen before. "You are more than worthy, Marcus Hayes," Alexa said, her voice quiet yet filled with emotion. "You are my equal." The words hit him like a wave, the full gravity of the moment sinking in. He had passed the trials, yes, but more than that, he had earned a place beside Alexa, not as a mere diplomat, but as something far more profound. I didn't expect this," Marcus admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I was just here for an alliance." Alexa smiled, a soft, almost vulnerable expression that transformed her usually stoic face. "Sometimes, the greatest connections come from the unexpected. You didn't just prove yourself to me, Marcus. You proved yourself to the planet, to my people. You've earned their respect, and mine." There was a brief pause as the two of them stood in silence, the weight of the moment settling over them like a warm blanket. And then, without warning, Alexa did something that Marcus had never imagined she would do. She knelt before him. The sight of the towering empress, her head bowed in reverence, left Marcus stunned. He immediately reached out to stop her, but Alexa raised her hand to gently touch his arm. "It is not often that I kneel to another," Alexa said, her voice steady. "But today, I kneel not just as an empress, but as a woman, one who has found a soul worthy of sharing her life." Marcus's heart swelled with emotion, the weight of her words sinking deep into his chest. He had faced countless challenges, endured trials that had pushed him to his limits, but this moment was something far greater than any victory he had ever achieved. Slowly, Alexa rose to her feet, her golden eyes meeting his once more. There was no distance between them now, no division of status or rank. They were equals, two souls who had faced their deepest fears and come out stronger for it. And then, as the twin suns of Verdunus set behind them, casting a golden glow over the grand hall, Alexa spoke the words that would change Marcus's life forever. "Marcus Hayes," she said, her voice soft but filled with strength. "Will you stand beside me, not just as a mate, but as a partner, as an equal in all things?" For a moment, Marcus could hardly believe what he was hearing. But as he looked into Alexa's eyes, he knew that this was where he was meant to be. He had found more than just an alliance on Verdunus. He had found a connection that transcended the boundaries of species, culture, and even the stars themselves. With a steady breath, Marcus nodded. "I will." And in that moment, beneath the glowing twin suns of Verdunus, Marcus Hayes and Empress Alexa stood side by side, two souls united in strength, respect, and love. It was a new beginning, not just for them, but for their people. Together, they would forge a future where the bond between human and Cathari would be stronger than ever. And as the stars shone brightly above, Marcus couldn't help but smile, for he had found something far greater than he had ever imagined.